Today's episode of This Week in Startups is brought to you by InVision. Find out why so many hot startups are using InVision to prototype, present, and collaborate on design in real time. Sign up for a 90-day free trial today at invisionapp.com/twist. And by Squarespace, an all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create a professional website and now an online store. For a free trial and 10% off your first purchase on new accounts, go to squarespace.com and use the offer code TWIST. And by AWS Activate, the Amazon Web Services Startup Program. It's easy to start and scale your business with AWS. Visit aws.amazon.com/activate. Today's show features an exciting talk with Jason and Chamath Palihapitiya at Hack the North, Canada's largest international hackathon at the University of Waterloo. We are at TWiST Startups, and he is at Jason on the Twitter.
That's what it's all about, man. They said money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you. Yeah. Money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you.
So Chamath, really inspiring day here. We got to see the labs and a bunch of amazing stuff. What do you think of what we saw today? What was particularly inspiring for you?
Probably the last meeting that we had was probably the most inspiring. We met with this great researcher, Andrew Wong, who's basically applying a lot of sort of unclassified machine learning to understanding the genome and trying to figure out, so it's just taking a step back, up until about a few years ago, we thought that the genome was a very kind of like linearly, easily understood problem. And then we realized, oh wait, there's all these massive dark patches. And in fact, what we were really sequencing was only 2%. And the other 98% we kind of ignored and threw away. As it turns out, that 98% probably is really important when you talk about the expression of disease. The problem is it's just massive data problem, just very difficult to understand. And he's trying to apply sort of computational logic. You know, I've said this before, like the scientists and the folks that figure out these crazy problems in genetics and health are not going to be biologists in the future. They're going to be computer scientists. And I think he's a testament to that. That was really amazing. And then we saw a bunch of stuff in antennas and terahertz and things like that. Microscopes. Yeah, really cool stuff.
So when you look at a group like this, I'm assuming everybody here is 18 to 25 years old, and you know, they see what's going on in Silicon Valley and the starting of companies. What advice do you give them in terms of picking a career path? Because technologists are so in demand, technical people are so in demand, that making money and finding a job is no longer a concern. And really, you're choosing between, do I want to be at a big company? Do I want to be at a university?
Yeah.
Do I want to start my own company? Do I want to go to Accelerator? What advice do you give young people you meet who are making that decision for the first time?
Look, we're entering, unfortunately, a very mercenary culture right now in Silicon Valley. And that mercenary culture is manifested in the following example. This guy that I worked with for a lot of years at Facebook started a company. I funded it. We sold it to Dropbox. And he's now the VP of engineering at Dropbox. His name is Aditya Agarwal. So like once every 6 months he comes down, we have lunch and we just talk about what's going on. And I said, so what is it like in San Francisco? And he said, hey, man, it's such a grind. It's like I interview these people right now, these engineers, and they come with spreadsheets. And these spreadsheets calculate their equity based on the imputed value of what they think this company is going to be worth, that company is going to be worth. And they'll grind me over a few hundred shares. And the problem with that hyper-mercenary culture is all of a sudden you've completely divorced yourself of any sort of passion and a reason why you'd want to work at a company. And the end result of that is that you'll not do as good of a job, and frankly, you won't make as much money. You know, when I went to Facebook, it was kind of a joke thing that people didn't totally understand. Most of my friends thought it was kind of comical that I would even go there because I didn't have to go there. But I believed in this idea. At the time, the way that we described it was sort of, I described it as a white pages for the world. And it just grew and grew and grew into something that had such massive impact. And then the ramification, the end of it was, to be very blunt, just extraordinary wealth. But I think if I had tried to seek it out, that's not what would have happened. And I worry that a lot of people are now just in the grind, you know, trying to jump into this thing, trying to arbitrage, trying to make a little money. I just don't think, particularly in technology, it's the goal because there's just such a vicious cycle. There's so much churn. It's hard. Most of these things don't work. That if you come in motivated by the wrong things, you never achieve anything, and then you just end up jaded and disappointed. I think unfortunately, like a lot of incubators are very problematic in that way because they just create a bunch of very jaded young folks who are acquisition fodder. But so that would be my advice: is you have to take a step back and try something that's defined in one of two paradigms. One is you yourself want it, madly want it, need it. Travis, who when we were driving, I was on the phone with TK. He started it for himself.
Yep.
Zuck started Facebook for himself. Ev started Twitter for himself. Larry and Sergey started Google for themselves. So that's one category. Then there's this other category, which is there's a market-defined opportunity that's screaming for a solution. But if you can't basically jump into something because of those two things, you're attracted by a market solution or you're attracted by a product you want to use yourself, you're just a scammy, arbitraging fuck, and you're just going to get left behind.
Right.
Because you're going to get found up by people like us and you're going to get fired.
Yeah.
That's raw, real advice. Don't do it. You'll make more money doing something you love, trying to have impact, than you will trying to make money.
So let's take a step back then. And how does one at a young age, and maybe not a ton of experience, frankly, find out what they actually love? I remember when I was in college, I had so many different interests. I couldn't pick one. How do you refine it down? Or do you just know when you find something you love?
I think that, a lot of the times people see products in the world and that kind of is a real big trigger for themselves. Like I remember, look, when I was in school, I was not particularly great in school. I was on academic probation. I was just kind of bumbling along, and fortunately I was able to get into Waterloo, which allowed me to pay for school. Otherwise I would have been really screwed because I would have been at Queens on OSAP and that would have... Just kidding.
Wow, burn.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I would have ended up at Western on OSAP.
Double burn.
I'm just kidding.
Here we go.
I'm just kidding. No, so look, when I was here, the best thing through these co-op terms was there was a lot of things that I thought I wanted to do based on what my parents told me or based on what I thought society thought was cool. And the co-op terms are great because I was able to calibrate and figure out that I liked them for a while, and then I became sort of intellectually bored with them. And then also I realized a bunch of other things just didn't matter, and I just had to have the self-confidence to sort of walk away from a more traditional definition of what I should do. So very simple example. When I was in the Waterloo Co-op program, the top jobs were program manager at Microsoft. This was at the time, which was a technical track, and the non-technical track was to sort of go work on Bay Street. And you'd get like a job offer at like TD Securities or Bank of Montreal, and people would clamor for these jobs. And I ended up getting one of those jobs, the latter category. I couldn't get an interview at Microsoft to save my life. And this is why they're fucked right now. But I was able to get a job at Bank of Montreal, and I worked on the trading floor, and it was one of the jobs. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. And very quickly I was like, wow, this is not what I wanted to do, even though at the time I had to be there because I grew up really poor. I had to pay off my OSAP. I was able to help my folks. But the minute I could get a little bit of headway, I quit because in that time I knew this is not what I wanted. And then when I went to the Valley, I got fundamentally lucky. I applied for all these jobs on the internet. Google, eBay, and the only company that gave me a job was Winamp.
And for people who don't know what Winamp was, it was one of the first MP3 players. This is before iTunes.
It was, but it was also, like one of the first consumer-facing platforms that basically created a really vibrant developer community. It was a product that had 100 million. We grew it to 100 million plus users at the time when the internet itself was only a few hundred million people. It was sort of an exploration in sort of the new world of media and all of this other stuff. But the point was, I got accidentally lucky. The great thing about Silicon Valley right now is there's a lot of companies where you can get accidentally lucky. And so I think you have to have a thematic sense of what you like. And then I think you just have to sort of give yourself one or two iterations to get to the place you want to be. While Winamp was great, I ended up at AOL for a long time, which was okay, not that great. But then that allowed me the platform to get to Facebook. And that was amazing.
I love InVision, and I've been using it now for about 3 or 4 months. And I have a ton of designers working for me at different companies, and I need to have structured conversations with them about product. And as you know, we live in the age of excellence. You have to have a great product. In order to have a great product, you have to have great designers. Let's say you get through that. You have a great idea, you have a great domain name, you got a great brand, you got a great designer. Now you have to iterate relentlessly, and you need a tool to do that. It's not enough to be sending PDFs back and forth or images or screenshots. That's nonsense. Or working in a chat room. All respect to HIP, Chat, and Slack. Those are the worst places to have a design discussion. If you're going to have a design discussion, you have to take it out of a chat room, you have to get it out of email, and you have to make it structured. You have to be able to put a little crosshair on this part of your app and say, hey, this could be better in these ways. What do you think? And CC the stakeholders and have them comment and then click a resolve button. That's what InVision does. And they also allow you to send a link to your phone, and then you can see natively what Inside 3.0 is looking like. And I'm going down to a conference room right after this ad read, and I'm going to be working on Inside 3.0. We're just going right to like this next generation stuff. And I can then leave and go to my poker game tonight, and I get an InVision when the designer's done at 1 in the morning, and I look at it, and I just have some inspiration, some notes. It has changed the way I do design. It is amazing, and it's used by over 300,000 designers, including people at Airbnb, Evernote, MTV, Adobe, Box, and Zendesk. Those are all companies much more successful than mine. So if you don't believe my endorsement, I mean, Zendesk, Evernote, Airbnb, we should all be so lucky. Go to invisionapp.com/twist. I love it, and they'll give you 90 days for free. Unlimited screens, collaborators, real-time comments, sketch commenting, and more. No email chains. Email chains and chat rooms are death. You do not want to use them for a design discussion. And trust me, when you hire a designer today, they're almost certainly going to say, how do you do design discussions? How do you do collaboration? And if you're a founder and you say InVision, they're going to want to come work for you. And I am having this happen to me all the time. People are now pitching me because they know my email, jason@inside.com, and they just send me an InVision. They invite me to their InVision. So now my InVision is getting filled up with people pitching me. And you know what? If you send me an InVision link for your new product as an angel investor, I'm going to click on it because I'm like, okay, you're cutting to the chase. I can tell if it's a good product or not if I can play with it. Oh yeah, and that's the great thing. When you get an InVision link, they can map out and click on stuff. So it's almost like the app works. You don't have to have a developer make a prototype. You just make 20 screens, and then they stitch them together. And they put little hot zones. When you click, it feels like you're using an app. It's brilliant. InVisionApp.com/twist. InVisionApp.com/twist. I love this product. Go use it and thank them. They're at InVision App on Twitter. It's a great product. Okay, let's get back to the program. Let's talk about that sort of time. You took a gig at, you took the gig of running AIM Instant Messenger and ICQ when they were at their peak. And you rode them in your tenure into the ground, literally losing millions of users a month. And this is when you and I met, because I had just sold my company and I was coming in the revolving door, and you were leaving to go work for a second-tier VC firm where you didn't fit in and you weren't successful. And so your career, having been so promising at Winamp, was spiraling downhill. It was as if you took the controls of the plane and the hydraulics stopped when your hands touched the controls.
Right.
And when they gave you the checkbook to then invest in companies, it was as if like you were just giving the checks to people who had absolutely no idea what they're doing.
Right.
And then you decide to go work for Facebook.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that period of, let's just say, like, it probably wasn't fun to go to work, and then it kind of sucked to go to work, and then it was kind of awesome to go to work. How did you manage that psychology of life sucking for an extended period of time?
I was really young. And the best thing that happened to me was AOL was in a period of deep decline. And they were firing everybody in sight. But what they would do is they would obviously fire the people that were getting paid the most, which roughly equated to the people that were the oldest.
And doing the least.
And what was left over were all these young people, and we would just get increasing responsibility because they just didn't have an alternative. And I tell people now, that was the luckiest thing that happened to me in many ways, because, look, when things work, I think a lot of people pretend that they know what happened. But you actually learn more when things aren't working, because you know what your effort hasn't done. versus what could have been a whole bunch of things has done. Was it your effort? Was it timing? Was it skill? Was it an accidental PR thing? Twitter blew up, if you remember, literally, and no offense to Evan, those guys, not because of those guys. That team has done more to retard the progress of Twitter, right? It blew up because Fred Wilson and those guys decided to blow it up at South by Southwest.
Yeah. It was sideways for at least 18 months.
And we had the fail whale constantly, and
they couldn't keep the service up and running.
It was
infighting.
So my point is, infighting.
Changing CEOs.
So my point is, it's sometimes very hard to conflate. All you do is really in success conflate luck and skill, but in failure you learn why all of these things aren't working. You learn how to build a better team, like a small, lightweight, fast, nimble team. You learn how to try and iterate and test stuff. You learn how to celebrate failure because most things aren't working. And you keep trying stuff and trying stuff and trying stuff, and you just dispense with the ego. I was surrounded by all these people that were just credentialed. They had all these degrees. They were just able to check all these boxes. They had a name that was pronounceable, all this shit. And they were fucking morons.
Yeah.
And it was just you just realize that's just not what it's about. And when you look at this, I look at this and I see, an unbelievably diverse group of people. You people are going to take over the world. You people are what I was 10 years ago. And there's this establishment change that is happening now. And so for me, what I learned was that establishment change has to happen. And so that's what sustained me, because I was I'm a little frustrated, but I'm learning. And I'm getting self-confidence to realize what the old parochial white man tells me is not right. He don't know what the fuck's going on.
I'm sitting right here, Chamath.
You know what I'm saying?
I do. I actually don't know what I'm saying.
And that's a huge realization.
Yeah.
And I think everybody's realizing this in their own sort of personal shape and form now. And so we're unlocking different parts of people's brains to be able to think that they're capable of anything. I felt that at AOL. But the problem was I didn't feel it in enough of a way. So when I got offered a job to go and work at Mayfield, I took it because, again, I went back to sort of the same patterns that I was exhibiting when I took that job at Bank of Montreal. It's the job that people wanted. It's what society tells you is important.
It's the hardest seat to get.
It's the hardest seat to get. But I walked in there and I thought within 2 months, wow, I made a huge mistake.
And what was that mistake?
I played to the rules of the man. And I didn't listen to my own gut. And I didn't have a way to tell my parents why something else that I was doing wasn't the right. You know what I'm saying? Look at today, it's the easiest it's ever been for you guys to be independent. Because you can point to success cases that validate the choices you're making. 6 years ago, there was fewer of those. 10 years from now, there'll be even more because a bunch of you guys will just be crushing it. So it's going to get easier and easier and easier. But at the time, it was hard for me. I grew up on welfare. How do you tell your parents, hey, listen, I had a job making a lot of money, I quit. Then I was making not that much. And then I finally, get promoted at AOL, you're making a couple $100,000 a year, I quit again. It's every time where they're okay, economic right around the corner, I left.
Right. And the idea of switching jobs every 3 or 4 years to them
was also
seemed insane.
It just seemed that's not what you do. You get in the seat. And for them, the idea that you're an executive, I was 27 years old. You're an executive at this company that's known. That's everything. And to me, it was nothing. And I just didn't have the courage to do anything about it. And then this Facebook thing was finally I just said, I just got to follow my gut. My instincts were telling me, this is it. Something is here.
Let's talk about that moment.
And I made the most important and the best investment of my life, which is I made a choice of my time. You know what I'm saying?
To spend your time at Facebook, not being a venture capitalist.
Exactly.
Let's talk about making the decision to go there, because when you decided to go there, it's 10, 20 million users. It was just coming out of the EDU space. Yeah. And most people believe that advertising on social networks could never work. And it did struggle for a long time until we saw whatever number of years later that mobile absolutely crushed it. So it eventually did work out.
Yeah.
What did you see in social networking, which was considered sort of glorified chat rooms at the time, that made you think it's bigger than glorified chat rooms?
So at Winamp, we had this framework that allowed people to build two different kinds, third-party developers to build two different kinds of things. One was very superficial UI layer on top of the Winamp player. We called that a skin. And the other thing was a more sort of like, technical capability that we used to call a plugin. So people would build equalizers, they would build auto tuners, they would build kinds of stuff, and they would build really cool UI. And what I saw was this community just rally around this idea of like a shared experience. Then I was at AIM. And what was crazy about that was that people just loved the shared experience, but in that context, it wasn't the celebration of music, it was the ability to communicate in real time. And in many ways, the best businesses in the world, what they've really done is taken a very obvious offline behavior and made it just dramatically easier online. And so a lot of the chat apps, that's really what they've done. It's inconvenient and cumbersome to communicate either with one person in real time, because you have the overhead of a telephone call, the phone is ringing, versus, hey, right? Just typing in something. So I thought to myself, like, what's the next logical point on that evolution? And what I wanted to see was whether there was a way to sort of unify a network of individuals. Again, we didn't call it the social graph then. I used to call it the white pages. Like your parents probably have these telephone books in their homes. They're white, right? It's got everybody's name and address. You call white pages. And so the idea was, can we build a white pages? And the question was, well, what does it sit on top of? And I thought the shared social experience there was a different kind of communication. And you could just see how people were interacting on Facebook, where this idea that once you know what other people are up to, you establish these relatively strong weak ties. And so you could have many, many, many weak ties to people. And that was just a force multiplier on your ability to feel like a human. And so in many ways, it was just a bet on a psychological feeling and whether we could capture that psychology in a bottle and then exploit that psychology by bringing it to a lot of people. And it worked. I mean, it is, in my opinion, the most complicated, interesting, nuanced study of psychology and software. It's just crazy. The ability that we were able to affect in all of you by programming to you things that we knew you would respond to. This picture, that status update, this link, and just understanding in an extremely detailed way all of the interconnections, how when you did something, it would affect you and you and you, and what I really wanted to get was him back on the service. And you map that out, and then you scale it up. I think it's just something that nobody has come close to replicating.
Oh my gosh, Squarespace. What an amazing product. I use it for all of our conference sites. We've been using it for years. You can build an elegant, clean, dynamic website that works on mobile. They call that responsive, and works on desktop, and has e-commerce, and has calendars, and has all these amazing features, beautiful templates, all for starting at like $8 a month, which is way too cheap. But I use this all the time. And actually, I was on Google Domains. Somebody invited me to Google Domains. And after I started a website, it's like, oh, do you want to use Squarespace? First choice. So even Google in their interface recognizes, because they launched this new domain buying product, that the first thing people are going to want to do is use Squarespace. So if it's good enough for Google to recommend Squarespace #1, and I recommend Squarespace first and foremost as the most elegant, simple to use, most feature-rich content management system, we call a CMS, is all you need to know. It's everything you need to create an exceptional website. And go to squarespace.com to try it out for free. No credit card is required. It starts at only $8 a month. And if you decide to keep your site after the trial, just use the promo code TWiST. Yes, use the promo code TWiST. And if you really are a fan of the show, please do me a favor. Say thank you at Squarespace for making a beautiful product and supporting at TWI startups. They also have, by the way, new apps for Android, Squarespace Blog and Squarespace Note. So they've got all the apps out on Android now and iOS, so you can just easily blog. They got 24-hour support too. So if you recommend it to a family member or another business, they're not going to be like calling you up to get support, dad support, cousin support, uncle support, which I get all the time, husband support. And it's what we use for all launch sites. Go to events.launch.co to see how we use it. And I was just asking somebody, Brandon, who works for me, like, hey, can you add this to the site, add this page? And he's like, yeah, sure. And I watched him. Beep, boop, boop. And all of a sudden, we had a new page on the website. Beep, boop, boop. All of a sudden, a new website page. Beep, boop, boop. Squarespace, that easy and beautiful. Everything you need to make a beautiful, exceptional, buttery website. Thank you, Squarespace. I love the product, and I love that you've supported This Week in Startups for so many years. Thank you. Let's get back to this amazing program. And why hasn't anybody been able to compete with Facebook, do you think? Is it the network effect? Is it something about the team there in terms of their relentlessness?
That team is the single best team I've ever worked with, I think. If you follow me on Twitter, I posted the values that I had for that team. And those things are like, they don't seem, in my opinion, they seem very benign. But even at Facebook at the time, people thought that they were too extreme. You know, things like very high IQ. And I thought, what the fuck? Like, you want dummies? Like, how do you win with dummies? Like, you win with people.
So you
that
were
are
prejudiced against stupid people?
Well, not all stupid people.
Right, we're friends. We're still here.
Many of them.
Many of them.
Not all. No, but like.
But it was a controversy to say, like,
team.
hey, let's optimize for the top 20%.
We would say, you know, aggressive and competitive. People didn't like that. We would say high quality bar bordering on perfectionism. But what you realize is, like, unless you believe that, then you just believe in nothing. But if you believe in that, you end up self-selecting to those folks that really believe that. And then when you go and attack a problem, you're able to work together in a way that just isn't possible. And that's what made that place special. And so the next great company that gets built will find a way to thread that magic together. But it's a people magic. Product market fit exists in a lot of companies. I wonder, like, you know, if our growth team, if we took Ray, you know, Javi, those folks, Alex Schultz, Naomi Gleit, these people are running big parts of Facebook, Uber, Pinterest. They're going to run the valley. If we took those people and stuck them on Twitter, how big would Twitter be? I suspect it'd be 500 million people.
So there is a culture problem at Twitter, you think?
No, I think there's a skill availability with those folks that is just absolutely unique.
And what do you think the skills are that people should be focused on today?
I mean, I would really encourage a couple things. One is, I think we all need to know how to code. I think all of you people just demonstrate the fact that this is the lingua franca of this is it, okay? Half of you can probably speak English. I mean, you don't look like you can speak English. English doesn't matter. Inefficient. You can't say anything. I mean, okay, there we go.
He's from Quebec.
We'll talk about that in a second. But this is the lingua franca of the 21st century. So knowing to code is a critical skill. Having an internal sense of confidence that the things that may have isolated you as different are now the strengths that make you powerful. Because you guys are coalescing. This is the power dynamic. This is the new establishment. You are it. You're deciding. How sick is that? I mean, that's sick. And so once you realize that, I think what you have to figure out is, like, how you can now be more true to that inner voice, right? And that's a really big challenge.
But how do people, for folks...
But I think that's the skill, figuring out that.
Being confident in your ability and your place in the world. Because 20 years ago, engineers were looked at how in the Valley? How were software developers?
As dispensable employee numbers. You were a dispensable unit of some, you know, board of directors. You were a pawn of a bunch of MBAs, and now that's just not true. And that's amazing. You know, you're in charge. And you're younger than ever. You're more powerful than ever. You can attract capital easier than ever. You know, you're black, you're brown, you're Chinese, you're white, you're female, you're male, you're gay, you're straight. Fucking awesome. You know what I'm saying?
It doesn't matter.
It just doesn't
skill.
matter. That shit doesn't matter. Like, it's like I grew up so frustrated chasing this ideal, and it's just like you realize it's just not it doesn't amount to much, because once you get into the veiled curtain, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, okay, now I'm in this position. You get to fly around, meet anybody I want, you know, and so many times I'm so disappointed because the image of what I thought that person represented was just so much higher than the reality of what that was. And then when I come back to the Valley, I feel at peace and I feel challenged again. And I feel like these people are real and they're trying to do stuff. When I'm here, I feel the same thing. And so that's what we all have to realize. This is, you people have to take over. Otherwise, the world is fucked. Do you understand? You have to take over.
Let's talk about building meaningful things versus building things. How does one find something to work on that is truly meaningful? You look at something like Facebook, it's like, it started as a way really for Zuck to meet girls, at least that's what they said in the movie, right? But it then became something incredible in terms of connecting humanity and having a major role in revolutions and communications around the world during, Arab Spring, et cetera. So does your idea when you start out have to be super meaningful, or can you just start with something that maybe is less meaningful and then build meaning into it?
I mean, I think the prevailing wisdom is all of this, blathering rhetoric about, everything starts as a trivial thing. People laugh at trivial things. I get it, but I think that language is fraught with a lot of hindsight bias. The reality is, I'm not sure if people are thinking whether it's trivial or not trivial. Again, I go back to someone built something for themselves that they needed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and
so that language is a very convenient way of trying to explain something that I think was much harder to explain and much more innate. So going back to, I think you're either going to build something you really like, or you should go into this other category. I transitioned myself from building something and helping build stuff that I wanted for myself to building something for the market. And the reason I did that was a very simple view that I had, which overpowered this. I felt like I had everything I needed. Okay? Yeah. I didn't need anything else.
Nothing was bugging you.
Nothing was really bothering me, except this idea that the right people weren't getting to the starting line. And what do I mean by that? People die, and of those people that died, one of those people could have been the next Steve Jobs. And when you unpack why are they dying, there's many reasons that should have a reasonable explanation. Okay? Or people are undereducated or miseducated. You need a degree from blah, blah, blah university to get in the door at blah, blah, blah place. Why? And so now you're locking and shutting people out. You're not getting money to the people that should get money to have the good ideas. So to me, those problems now dominated the way that I thought about what I wanted to do with my time. And so what I tell folks is it's completely okay to build something here, but don't describe it as like, we have a really grandiose ambition, but a really trivial start. Describe it as, I'm building this because I want this. As long as that meets your bar, then just do it. But if that's not how you think, or if you're not really motivated by that, then there is a wealth of stuff over here. That literally everything in this bucket here, especially the high order bits, healthcare, education, financial services, they're completely ripe for disruption, and they're multi-trillion-dollar categories. Trillion with a T. Which means that, when you take a 1% shot at an idea there, you could still end up with a $50 billion company. Not so true over here. Mortality rates are higher in terms of the companies. The ideas are a little bit more trivial. And then the echo chamber, it's kind of like it makes bad ideas on top of bad ideas on top of bad ideas. And I think that's really dangerous for all of you. Because what it does is you start to chase an ideal of a person and their lifestyle and manifest it in a shitty company doing a shitty thing that ends up failing. And you shouldn't do that.
Let's talk about education, healthcare, and finance. Let's take each one of those apart. What are the opportunities in each?
Well, just think about healthcare. So look, my dad is in renal failure, which means he's in end-stage renal failure. 3 times a week, he has to go to the hospital. They drain his blood, they clean his blood, they pump his blood back into his body. This year, he's had diabetes for 30 years. He's 75, so he's had it since he was mid-40s. 10 years of pills, 10 years of insulin, and now 10 years of dialysis. And now he's at the end of that, and there's no solution for that, so he's going to die. Now, I have all this money. I have all this influence. I have all this notoriety. I can't do anything about my dad. That really fucking is frustrating.
Sure.
Like, frustrating. And so I started a company around diabetes, and very simple idea. There's been a lot of literature that says if you can just understand the data, you can actually control how people's diabetes changes. Now, does anybody here have a relative or a mother, father, somebody you care about with diabetes? Anybody have? I mean, look how many fucking people's hands are raised.
It's almost everybody.
I mean, that's like, this is an epidemic. okay? And it has massive socioeconomic ramifications beyond the obvious, right? Like if you look at like inner city development, like it's like no fresh food gets into there, you know? There's no Whole Foods there. There's just Chick-fil-A and McDonald's. And so what happens? Diabetes gets worse and worse and worse. You talk about whole swaths of populations that are held down, right? Is that right? It's not fucking right. So what do? So what did I do? Okay, let's just start by getting the goddamn data off the glucometer. You get it off the glucometer, you send it into the cloud, you use some simple machine learning, you apply some heuristics, you save people's lives. And it's shown to be effective. So we do that. It takes us 3-4 years. It takes us $5 or $6 million. So be it. But at the end of it now, that's a business that is signed contracts in the last 8 weeks to take care of 3 million patients in the US at $100 a patient a year. That's a $300 million revenue business overnight. That's going to be a $50 billion company. I own half of it. Okay?
Yeah.
So then I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do the same thing in asthma and COPD. I'm going to do the same thing in chronic heart failure. You know, in education, it's like, why do we celebrate these useless, letters after a person's name? We should celebrate skills. 10 years ago, we used to, talk about the psychology of society. You used to introduce yourself in very defined ways. I grew up here. I went to school here. I did this.
I have an MBA.
I have an MBA and I work
have a
here.
master's.
Now you don't do that as anymore. Or you're trending to a place. And so for education, I just think, okay, so we wanted to start something that basically started to kind of rip apart society's dependence on degrees. Not that degrees aren't good, but we should celebrate skills and capability. Because then it's not the best talker, it's not the best manager, it's the best developer. And you can demonstrate how well you can code, you should win, right? So there's this great guy in the UK, he was moving back to Portland. Me and Kevin Rose did a little seed investment. It was working, I did the A, we did the B, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, 3 years later, Treehouse, I would tell you, if you want to learn how to code, go there. It's $30 a month. We have more students on Treehouse now than the entirety of every single US undergrad CS department. In 3 years. We don't issue degrees. And then we put these people in jobs. And they tell people, oh, I have this certificate from Treehouse. And to me, what do I like? Is it that it's going to be $1 billion business? No, I don't care. It's the psychology of how somebody else who's been trained to ask you where you went to school and judge you can't fucking judge you. You understand? Because now you show up, and man, you run circles around that person, and right out of high school, you just learned to code. How sick is that? That's powerful. So to me, I like thinking about those kinds of problems and then saying, let me go and apply my resources against that problem. That's fun. It makes me feel alive. It makes me feel like I'm being a productive part of the world.
When you talk to young entrepreneurs and you're deciding if they should be the one to pursue these big visions and you're going to write them that check, which, let's face it, is a critical piece of this, what are things that you look for? Things that will knock them out of contention as well.
Look, I think I don't think people have to be good speakers. I don't think they have to be good presenters. I think people have to care about whatever it is that they're talking about. That has to be demonstrable. And I think you want to see a little sense of naivety and fearlessness. And I think it's just about judging.
Naivety and that fearlessness. What does that mean?
So let's look at Kyle and Mike. So Jason and I funded this business, these two kids in LA. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to build a marketplace around home health care. So just again, I'll ask the question, has anybody been in a situation where your grandparents or someone that you love has had to have someone come into the home to help take care of them?
A home attendant.
A home attendant. Okay, so enough. So you guys understand this. So I was in this interesting situation where my assistant said to me, Chamath, I'm flying to Boston. I got to go to Boston. I said, what's wrong? She said, my grandfather was.
Check.
Okay.
You're on.
My grandfather was pushed to the ground by his health attendant. and I'm just going to go kick some ass. I was like, see ya. I'm good. See you later. But it started to occur to me, and now, my parents are in their 70s. I tried to get somebody to come into our house. My dad kicked them out, didn't want their help. Anyways, I thought, what a great thing. This thing has to be solved. These guys show up.
Yeah.
And so these two guys, Kyle and Mike, they're in LA. They were the most empathetic two people I'd ever met, but you could tell they were just like nails. It's like they cared about the problem. Kyle's dad had been dealing with the situation of trying to take care of his mom. And it's just like just imagine like your parents are aging. And let's just say, forget all that stuff that annoys you about them and whatever. But think about this idea that they should be able to like live in dignity the last few years before they die. Who agrees with that? We all agree with that. Exactly. They're your parents. And so why not find a simple way just to like connect great caregivers with that market? And so in that example, for me, what struck me was that's a massive, huge, multi-billion-dollar revenue opportunity. Huge market-driven demand. Mm. They had a very personal thing that was driving them. And they were fearless. And what I meant by fearless was they had no shame about learning to win. What does that mean? They went to so they decided to just launch in LA. And within LA, they just decided to launch in one specific county. But they went to every single nursing home. They went to every single shared nursing facility. They went to every single hospital. They talked to every single discharge nurse. Then they were like, well, how do I make the service better? They signed up for every single service possible to figure out how people onboard. They signed up for Uber, for Lyft, for TaskRabbit, for Instacart. And they just shamelessly did this because they were so driven by this.
Yeah.
And they're not telling me that, but that's what I'm unpacking.
In the conversation.
In the narrative of, because I asked, so how do you stand up an operational blah, blah, blah? Right. And they tell me about these things, and I'm like, wow, it's so, and it's, the superficial is, oh yeah, they went to a bunch of onboardings. But that's not what, you know what I'm saying? Like, it takes a lot of courage and to sit around and just pretend to be a Lyft driver, pretend to be an Uber driver, I don't know, I just think to me that just speaks to a fearlessness.
Yeah, there's definitely a hustle and a lot of knowledge coming from zero.
Yeah.
And their previous business.
So that's an example. Another example that
what was their previous business? Do you know?
It was like some shitty startup.
Their previous business was they were Uber for drinks. So if you were in a bar...
Oh, stop, really?
If you were over there...
That's a terrible idea.
And the bar was over there, you could order your drinks here, and the bar would bring the drinks from there to there.
Yeah, that's a bad idea.
It didn't work.
See, you know what's so sick? I never asked them that. I don't really care what they did before.
Yeah.
I think it's cool that they failed. I could not tell you where they went to school. I have no clue.
Yeah.
I was in a meeting, so I owned... anyways, whatever. Long story short, I owned some stuff, I sold some stuff, made a bunch of money, got sued. So
everybody can relate.
I'm sitting with these lawyers in Toronto, and in the conversation, they start talking about schools, and my general counsel is with me. I had no idea where he went to school. This is my lawyer. I didn't know where he went to undergrad. I didn't know where he went to law school.
You don't know if he has a degree.
I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming he does. But I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But anyway, so just it speaks to all of that superficial stuff doesn't matter. I'm trying to figure out this other stuff. Another company, Sue Kim.
Yes.
Brilliant. Kevin worked there. This is a great story. She had this company. It was on launch. I met her on the stage of launch. And I asked Jason, who's the smartest person in this conference right now? He said, Sue Kim.
There's 6,000 people there.
Yeah. I met with her and I said, okay, listen, let's cut to the chase. I think, and I got to know her a little bit, I think you're amazing. I think your idea is shit. I have a better idea. Let's go do it together. She shut the company down, uprooted her whole team, moved out 2 weeks later. I funded it. She's raised $10 million. Business is great. She's going to build a great business.
And the business is, explain it.
Basically, it's building an index of human talent, human capital. And it starts in math and science. They crowdsource all this amazing content in math and science. People go and ask questions, answer questions, solve problems. But really what they're doing behind the scenes is ranking, observing, measuring, and figuring out human potential. And then they channel that human potential to places like universities that may want great students, companies who want to hire the really smartest kids, don't care that you just have an undergrad. You know, places that want to have solutions to problems. You know, I mean, it was the craziest thing. Within 5 or 6 weeks of launch, she gets a phone call from my fixer. I have this guy that fixes shit, and he says,
they saw Pulp Fiction.
and he said, yeah, I mean, you know, everybody needs a fixer. And anyways, my fixer's like, hey, listen, I need to fly Sue to DC, and I said, all right, do it. And he walks her into the head of the NSA, and they're like, they show up a picture of this Ethiopian kid on Brilliant. Says, we need to know all the information about this kid.
The Ethiopian kid.
I don't want this kid going to Al-Shabaab and like building a dirty bomb. This kid's clearly a genius. And Sue's like, well, tough shit. You can pay for it like everybody else, or leave me the fuck alone.
Yeah.
She's 24 years old. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
She's like a Korean American girl that was taught to sit, head down, go to school, grind it out.
Right.
And here she is telling the head of the NSA to go suck it.
Sweet.
How strong is that?
Very strong.
She's
and
the nuts.
She's got the database
She's nails.
of just all the smartest people in the world.
But that's what I'm saying. It's like, so she had that latent inside of her.
Yeah.
And now she's in this environment, this kooky, crazy place where she now feels like she can be like that. It's amazing.
Right.
So that gives me so much energy, because then there's a bunch of other stuff that just completely fails.
And how do you look at failure in your portfolio now as a VC and the amount of risk you're taking? Do you like things that have a majority chance of failure? Do you try to push people to go harder and take more risk?
I live by
balance it?
I live by a very simple philosophy, and it's not mine. I was flying home from Vegas with Vinod Khosla, and on his jet, and VK says, Chamath, look over here. We're flying into San Jose. And he says, look over this side. It's like all this like land. He says, see all that land? I'm like, yep. And this was like, I don't know, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, something. And he says, I own all that land. You know how much that land is worth? And I said, I don't know. He said, it's probably worth $200 million. And I said, okay. And he said, you know what? You know how much I'm worth? I don't know. He said some number, 3-4 billion. He said, I'm going to take that 3 or 4, and it's either going to be worth 40 or it's going to be worth 0. And if it's worth 0, I got that. And then he went and funded alternative energy, genetics, just amazing, groundbreaking, risk-seeking stuff. I was not in a position to think or act or do like any of that until about 3 or 4 years ago. And I want to try to live like that. A lot of the money that I have is going to come back to this place. This place is going to be the nuts, It's going to keep getting better and better and better. The rest of it's going to go into a bunch of genetics work. It's not going to my kids. It's all going to go away. So I feel like I'm just going to free roll it all, and I'm going to end up with a ton of it that'll go back into the world to do a lot of good. A lot of it in hopefully folks like your hands. And so that's kind of how I view it. I'm a risk-seeking individual. You know this from poker. Like that's what
I have seen.
The best thing that my parents taught me about growing up poor is they were never ashamed about being poor. I was ashamed about being poor. They were not. And at some point, the bit flipped, and I said, I'm not ashamed. Like that's not, I should have been ashamed because I smell like fucking curry every day. But not because I was poor, My house stank. Straight up stank.
All right, so let's talk about some very practical things. Incubator, accelerator, or not? What do you think? Because
the best companies are not going to come out of incubators.
Okay.
Just not.
That's
They have never. They never will.
Dropbox, Airbnb would beg to differ.
Facebook, Twitter, Google, Tesla,
Uber.
SpaceX, Uber. There's a category of company for which an incubator is a wonderful smorgasbord of things. There's a risk that all of these incubators, or what they're really becoming, is the false signaling that Harvard, Stanford, MIT represented in our generation. That's the risk. Because it becomes these cookie-cutter factories of people who can, again, when you have 50,000 people applying to get into Stanford, who's getting in? A lot of the box checkers get in. So I suspect that you have that same problem at scale for many of these incubators. That's the risk. So my intuition and the data, the historical data supports it. The mega transformational companies are founded by folks who are trying to solve a problem or who have a defined market opportunity and they just go out and they just do it.
So
It's not about the belts and suspenders, of valuations and all this other stuff.
So what's the good that comes out of them? Because
it's great. Now
people are coming out.
It's a great, at its best, it's a great training platform, and it gives people a lot of confidence. And again, it's yet another tool. Again, so this is about how you view it.
Right.
It's a great way to give you more confidence to then seek and go after your own internal sense of what you want to do.
Got it. So,
I think that, by no means are they bad. If you're asking me, do they generate the mega outcomes? No.
Right.
Not been demonstrated thus far. Yeah, I'm not, this is the hard part, but it's also the very clarifying part of having been part of a $200 billion company. My bar is high. My capital is largely infinite, but my bar is high. So I don't have an issue. 2 million, 4 million, 10 million, 20 million, 50 million. It doesn't matter. Like, you guys are all on Slack. I wrote a $40 million check after 2 meetings in that fucking company. So it's not about money.
Yeah.
Scope. Scope. Ambition. So lose the money. It's okay. I'm proud of you. You'll learn something from it. You'll go do something great. Travis, again. Yeah. The first thing Travis says to me on the phone today, Chamath, I'd like to want to tell you about this really great company I'm involved in called Red Swoosh. And the funny thing about that was that's what Travis's company was before he started Uber. And that's how I met Travis in the context of Red Swoosh. Same guy, but look at the outcomes.
Yeah, 20 million, 20 billion.
Yeah. I mean, on its way to 100 billion.
Who knows?
Yeah. So my point is that I would really I'm unafraid of losing money because I don't care because I'm not going to end up with anyone I die. So whatever.
So why?
It's a superficial thing. Scope, ambition, big concept.
Why are you not building as opposed to what you do, which is invest in many things? Like, that was a choice. Obviously, you have this big stack of chips. You could go build whatever you want. Why do
leverage?
Yeah, explain.
I think I've never been particularly good at details. I've never been particularly good at doing one thing very well. I'm always kind of a hopscotcher. So I just wanted a platform where I could influence positively, where I think I have a very unique thing to offer the world that very few people have, which is a perspective. I have a perspective. You know what I'm saying? And it's not necessarily right nor wrong, but it's my own, and I'm willing to back it up with my money. And when that aligns with yours, let's go. And so that's why, for me, this platform is so powerful, because I can get anybody on the phone. Like, John Doerr and I were having lunch 2 Fridays ago, and we're like, somebody has to go after the electronic medical record market in a really big way. Let's go and take down this company called Epic, which is this massive old conglomerate. It's like the IBM of healthcare.
So this is what happens in the Star Chamber.
Yeah, so this is what happens in there. But the first 2 calls, John could call the White House and say, guys, I need to see what's going on with Meaningful Use 3, which is a specific part of the ADA, the Affordable Care Act. I call the head of Mayo and I'm like, hey, listen, I think we're going to do this thing. I need you to back me up and be willing to rip out Epic if we do this. Now I just need an entrepreneur to go do it.
That's the finite quantity.
But see what I'm saying? Like, we can line things up for success.
Right.
And now it's like, let's go. Okay, it may take $100 million. We may fail. But wow, what a great way to fail.
All right. So we're going to take some questions from the audience. I don't see any microphones, so I don't know exactly. Oh, there is a microphone. So they're going to run around. You're going to raise your hand. And you're going to give a very concise question. Not a promo or anything like that. Just a concise question. Not your life story, not therapy, not your first project, but a solid question. Those people got kicked out, I take it. That's good, yeah. And I'm going to ask you about the world and things outside of technology, religion and terrorism, and what's happening with ISIS, what's happening in the Middle East. We talk about, hey, all these people are now going to run the world.
So this is what I'm talking about. If we want stability in the world, we do it by giving young people opportunity. I mean, if you look at the riots that happened a few years ago in Paris, if you look at sort of like the Arab Spring and how it really started with the self-immolation of a fruit stand worker in Tunisia, this is happening because people don't have access to opportunities. So if you go and fix the basic boundary conditions of life, your ability to just live and not die, your ability to have access to a reasonable set of skills, and then your ability to get enough money, the world is a different place. These people are not going and figuring out how to go and fight. They're figuring out how to go and live, you know?
Let's talk about jobs. I mean, we have this perpetual unemployment here in the United States. It's not going away, while the polarization of wealth continues and jobs keep getting eliminated because of robots, because of automation. Do you believe that we're going to be having less jobs in the future, or that more jobs will be created, or we're going to have to deal with a society that might have 20% less work to do or 30% less work to do because of efficiency? What's the truth?
I think that at current course and speed, if we don't figure out new things, that's exactly what's going to happen. We're going to have 30% structural unemployment, and things will be in a very bad place. But what are the new things? You know, we find different forms of energy, which allows us to redefine transportation. We go to different places. We figure out different kinds of materials that didn't exist before that allows us to build different things. So those are the kinds of structural innovations that right now, we need to bend the laws of physics beyond our understanding of them. And I think that's like sort of like this first big step in kind of solving that problem. But otherwise, we will have these structural economic issues. And that's going to affect all of you guys a lot.
And what about the polarization of wealth? I mean, people get huge...
Rich people have an obligation to give it back. I mean, just, you know what I'm saying? You can't, by definition, you are making it off of a mass market, right? You don't become a billionaire by basically sitting on top of a few thousand people. You make it by building services for hundreds of millions to billions of people. So those same people that give you wealth, you don't think you have a responsibility to do something right by them? That's fucking crazy to me.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's like, it's not for me. I look at my kids and I think they're so lucky that they can be around what all of this is, but they're so cursed. Because if I did it the wrong way, they would think like they deserved it. They didn't do a fucking thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I see a lot of these people.
So they're not getting huge inheritances.
No. I mean, I would hope that they come here. You know what I'm saying? If they want to start a business, I'll fund it.
Yeah.
I'll treat them like any other entrepreneur. Infinitely, I'll fund it.
Yeah.
But them having money, no.
Okay, let's take a question.
How's it going? So if you have a question, raise your hand. It has to be super quick. We only have a couple minutes. Up there, yell it loud. Yes.
Okay, awesome. So in a startup environment, there's often very limited market information. How do you find out what customers want?
Thank you for yelling.
Great question. Okay. In those market-defined opportunities, there is so much information that people just refuse to lead, largely out of sheer laziness. I'll give you a simple example. In healthcare, if you guys want to understand, guys, I'm telling you, you guys, individually, each of you, could build several billion-dollar companies in healthcare. The ACA, Obamacare in the US, has implications not just in the US, but in the rest of the world. We're talking about, just in the United States, a reallocation of $3 trillion of capital. If you want to understand what to do, read that act. That's it. And you'd be shocked at the stuff that you'd learn. And it's amazing that sometimes, like I sit with my peers, and they don't know the first thing because they're just intellectually lazy. But, you know, in the example of healthcare, that's what I would do. In the example of education, I think like the trends, you don't need to know much more than this. We're moving to a skill-based economy. And it's about less about degrees and all about knowledge. And there's just going to be a complete reallocation of human capital. And you're talking about basically figuring out GDP. It's just...
So the next question is from the live stream, actually. What has been your biggest mistake in your career, and what would you have done differently?
I thought you said we didn't have a lot of time.
I mean, you know...
Let's get you back for the white guy comment before. We're very good friends. We do this at a poker table for hours a week.
I don't know, man. I make a lot of mistakes, but to be honest with you, this may sound so sick, but like, I don't really think about them that much. So I don't have like that great big thing that I regret. Shit happens. So I get a lot of stuff wrong. Most of the times I'm wrong. Often wrong, never in doubt. That's what I say. And I say it to remind myself, because it's okay. And I don't get caught up in like, you need to be right.
You only need to be right once.
to.
I mean, that's your career.
Exactly. Exactly.
And now you get to be right 100 times because you got ammunition.
Exactly. No, you're exactly right. That's exactly right. And I'm not ashamed of being wrong. It's okay. So I don't know what my biggest mistake was. I know that I've made a lot of them. I should be making more in the future. If I don't, that's death.
Okay, another question.
Okay, we have time for like one or two more. So who has the quickest question?
We're going to do 10 more. Keep going.
Right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
You mentioned building something with a purpose. Well, what's your opinion of startups that build something and then the users define the purpose? For example, not that.
It's great. Yeah. But again,
So
I think,
can you all repeat the question real quick?
Oh, yeah, so the question was, what about products where it doesn't have a defined purpose, but the users figure out a purpose? And you said that's fine.
I think that's great, but I'm saying, I'm pretty sure, I don't know this to be true, but I'm pretty sure that those first few folks that built Snapchat used it in that way because they wanted to use it in that way.
Yeah,
I know for a fact that with Tinder, those guys built it that way because they wanted to use the product that way. Now, I also sold it, but whatever.
Yeah.
I mean,
If you read Evan's emails, he was definitely looking to, trade pictures.
I think the point is, the initial starting point is because you're using it in one way. They may show you a trail of breadcrumbs to something else. That's great. But again, I go back to, you got to start because you need it yourself.
There's a great Canadian author, William Gibson, who said the street finds its own use for technology. Let's take another question. That dude with the hat.
Looking for purpose, Africa is the mind for them. What do you think about Africa?
I think that the two most obvious things that I think
Seven more questions?
That I think will make a ton of money in Africa. One is just banking in general. I think like banking has been defined as these regional things, United States, Canada, whatever. And through things like Bitcoin, and now frankly, through things like Alipay even, I think all of that is up in the air. So thinking about financial services in that community are ridiculous. Like you can.
Oh yeah, the question was, what are your thoughts on Africa as a market?
What are the kinds of things that would be interesting in Africa? I think financial services would be also a monstrosity. M-Pesa is nuts.
People don't even know what this is, but explain what it is and why.
Well, it's an entire functioning payment system that operates largely through SMS.
It's a cryptocurrency before there was one, essentially.
That's a nice soundbite. Not correct, but it's a good.
Okay, it was a digital currency before.
There you go.
Digital because it wasn't crypto.
Yeah.
All right, another question. This dude in the blue shirt.
What does your startup dream team look like?
What does a startup dream team look like? You need one extremely obstreperous, slightly chubby Greek. Around him,
You need a really skinny brown guy.
You need a kind of code,
it's becoming a sitcom.
It is. Okay. You need probably like 2 or 3 really, really, really sick developers. You need one quasi-developer who's more of an organizing layer. And I think you need one person who's just a maniac and just a bundle of energy. Ideally, those people are also as different as possible.
Why?
Because I think when you're forced to find commonalities other than by the superficial commonalities, it just creates way better teams. It doesn't necessarily mean like, 4 guys and you need 1 girl, or like 4 girls, you need 1 guy. Like that's not, you just have to be different. Different in how you were raised, different in how you think.
Extrovert, introvert, judger, thinker, feeler.
Like different in religion if that's the thing like just differences. You need differences, but commonalities. And against those kind of 4 archetypes, like I see those 3 or 4 people in any meeting, I get super excited.
I include a designer in that team.
So we have a question on Twitter. It's, if a degree is less relevant in today's economy, what is the role of university?
I think that university's job is to impart skills. And I think it's to connect the dots between theory and true knowledge. And so a place like Waterloo, you learn the theory. And then in 4 months, you're forced to apply it and you develop knowledge. Then you learn some more theory. Then you apply it and you develop knowledge. And then what happens is, in 5 years, what you're graduating is just a much more enlightened, thoughtful individual. And it's because of those work experiences that help bookend and calibrate everything you're learning every day. And in the schools that don't offer that, finding a way to seek that out, I think, is really important. But that's the role of a university. It brings different people together. It allows you to immerse yourself in different ways of thinking. Be allowed to just think, and so that you're not just living on your iPhone email inbox all day. So it's about those things at the edges now, as opposed to the BASC or the PhD.
And people are down on universities because the cost and the value when compared to skills is off. Is that the issue?
So Ryan Carson, who's the CEO of Treehouse, I mentioned it earlier, tweeted this thing out. He's like, every year, Treehouse graduates 90,000 people, total student debt, 0. Every year, Corinthians, which is like a big conglomerate for-profit, graduates 80,000 people, so 10,000 less. Total debt, $1 billion.
One's a scam, one's the real deal. The dude up there has been holding his hand up between questions the entire time with the headphones on.
Do it!
You got it.
Bring it!
Yeah, so the question is, talking to international startups where if you lose, you are personally in debt, you personally have to pay people's unemployment, and you can be ruined for life, versus America, where you can fail over and over again and start over the next day and have no personal liability.
Right, so we were talking about this in the car. The most important thing that is happening outside of the United States was what happened this morning when Alibaba opened. Okay?
A shareholder.
And why is that? It's because now there's a $200 billion company grown by Chinese, for Chinese, in China. And it sends a signal to all Chinese, you don't need to go to the United States. Screw their complicated healthcare system. Screw their convoluted and racist immigration practices. Screw their idiotic foreign policy. I'm staying here. And as a result, an ecosystem develops. And so the long-term solution is that we need the Alibabas in as many countries as possible. Native folks from those countries that show that it's possible, and then create the incentives for others to support the next versions of that. Canada had a few. We need the next generation of those here. India needs that. Flipkart could be it, but it could be others. So that's what we need.
And if you're in one of those countries where they personally hold people responsible for like a corporation going under, or make you go to court to fire somebody, like France, you need to leave.
You need to leave France.
It's just not entrepreneurial.
Yeah. You need to leave France.
Just leave France.
Let's not talk about France, but you just need to leave France.
But they're just never going to create anything important.
Jason says in the car, it's like, what kind of country, Gerard Depardieu, the 78th best actor in the world, what kind of country loses their best actor?
To Russia.
To Russia, of all places.
He left Paris for Russia because he didn't want to pay the taxes. Dude in the orange shirt who won't put his hand down.
Okay, so where are the next big companies going to get built? If you look at the percentage of the S&P that's in technology, it's like 12%, in my opinion. The more important question is, what is it going to be in 30 years? I think it's going to be 50, 60%. Tech companies. I think only half of those at best are Silicon Valley companies. And I think the rest of those are going to be from everywhere else.
Which is an extraordinary number.
It's an extraordinary number. When Flipkart goes public, which it will, it'll be monstrous. Alibaba and JD.com, monstrous. When Alipay goes public, monstrous. WeChat itself is creating an ecosystem in China that's going to support $15 to $20 billion companies. It's happening. It's happening in other places outside the US. And frankly, it's good. Because now the challenge for the United States is like, where do we get our talent from? There was like these crazy studies like 40% or a third of like all engineers were Asian, South Asian in the Valley. Not anymore. Where are they going to be? They're going to stay in Canada. They're going to stay in India. They're going to stay in China. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the U.S. evolves to support a more dynamic environmental ecosystem or entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Guy in the back.
The dude, the gray shirt, yeah.
The gray shirt dude. Question is your time in university correlated with your ability as an entrepreneur?
In certain aspects, absolutely. The things that we saw today, if you're trying to do something fundamental in physics, you need to have academic prowess. If you're going to do something in like terahertz signaling and antennas, you're going to need some level of academic prowess. My only point is that for all of you who are going to get a lot out of school, there's a lot of folks that you probably know who will not, and who will have benefited from a different kind of education. And all we needed to do was give them enough self-respect and respect to say that that's okay and equivalent to me, even if I graduated from a BASc in electrical engineering from Waterloo. That's all we had to do. We got to just decide that that's okay.
Take the final question from the other chat, the other room.
Yep, so this is our final question from the live stream. If you don't have unlimited funds, then how do you expect to change the world on the same scale you're describing?
I mean, dude, like, I had no money. I got lucky, so whatever. But like, now I have this money. I'm willing to give it to you.
Come up with a big idea.
Take it.
All right, on that note, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, one thing. I just want to say one thing.
Oh, yeah. What about the fellow thing you're doing?
Okay, guys. So look, we have this great thing called Fellows. It's a fellow program. Fellows at s23p.com.
s23p.com.
Very simple proposition. It's mostly for co-ops at Waterloo. We're probably going to expand it to outside, so just apply. You get paid a prorated salary that's approaching what, 100K a year? What is it? 100K prorated?
$8,500 a month.
$8,500 a month you get paid. You get to go work at a bunch of really crazy big idea startups. Mm-hmm. And if you're really good, we'll give you vested equity in that startup when you leave. And a huge recommendation, all you have to do is be able to pass the coding challenge. Okay, $8,500 a month, vested equity, baller, Silicon Valley.
How much face time they get with you?
A fair amount.
Yeah?
Yeah.
No, realistically, they'd be able to have lunch with you or something?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're hanging out at the office.
And look, I mean, you get tickets to the Warriors. I mean, just like all kinds of cool shit happens.
Stuff, man. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, one more time for Chamath Palihapitiya.